to a new episode of Campus to Capital. Today, Konstantin and myself are in a bit unusual setting. We're recording at Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship today, and our guest is Yerrie Kim. She's the Executive Director at CSE. Thank you so much for actually hosting us in your office today.
My pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And before we start, the very active listeners of it's basically a tradition right now for the second season that we bring our little guest present for our guests. So
Campus to Capital.
Exactly.
Is what we like to call it.
Thank you so much.
Maybe you find a place in your office. I don't know.
Picture my face.
Maybe let's now dive into the very interesting topics we have on the agenda today. Yerrie, you started out, or you hold different degrees from MIT and Harvard, combining business economics and public policy. So how did that, very ambitious, I would say, academic perspective shape the way you think about entrepreneurship today, and also about innovation and institutional responsibility at your job?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It takes me back to many years back. For me, my choice of undergraduate was actually a little bit by chance. When you were very young, late teens, early 20s, I wasn't entirely sure what I was stepping into. But one of the first immediate attractions and interests that I found myself attracted to at MIT, which is a very technical school, as you might know, was actually the Center for Entrepreneurship there. And particularly there was the MIT Entrepreneurship Competition, which the competition in itself was actually a very active event. At the same time, the organizing team was also a mix of undergrads and business school graduate students. And because of the nature of MIT, it attracted many different people from outside of MIT as well. And it was a very vibrant environment. So I think it's fair to say that I probably spent more time working on both, being an organizer of entrepreneurial activities on campus while being a student there, as well as being involved in various startup activities as a student. More than going to class regularly and so on. And so I think it was actually from that university experience that I sort of got that bug implanted in me. Previous to that, I think the concept of entrepreneurship was very foreign to me, or the word was even foreign to me, but I learned by being a part of that kind of environment. During my, once I graduated, I felt that the right choice to make for my first job was actually something that would give me a little bit of, or as much learning opportunity as possible, and something that was somewhat considered to be challenging. And so I did end up doing a investment banking career as the first thing I did after university. At the same time, I think very soon into that, I realized I actually don't really want to be doing finance for the long haul, but that I really would rather learn business, the art of doing business, which then led me to Harvard, as you mentioned, and that's where I started my MBA. During the MBA, I lots of different interests and lots of different nationalities, all very sort of plugged in and tuned in to various different interests of individuals. But I found myself somewhat attracted to this idea of, again, sort of business building, particularly around how can we use business not just to make a commercial gain, which I've seen already in the investment banking side, but that wasn't the only thing that was impacting me. I always felt that business principles and business concepts should be used for social impact and social good. So that's what actually led me to a public policy degree at the Kennedy School. And to answer your question about how does this shape me as I am today, I think actually quite a lot. From a relatively early, from my early 20s, I've learned, I sort of caught the entrepreneurial bug through MIT. I've also then sort of expanded my tool set, both theoretically, from a business school, and as well sort of was able to give a larger prospect of where those skills can be applied. And so things that naturally attracted me were like public-private partnerships or social enterprise, or even if it was something commercial, how can we think about businesses doing good, not just extracting from different resources. So definitely shaped me a lot, and it's also sort of obviously led me to many different exciting career paths. And funnily enough, here I am back at a university running an entrepreneurship center. So definitely full circle.
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, I had a friend who just made it to the semifinals of the MIT entrepreneurship competition, and so from what I heard, the rigor there is very, very incredible. And I think right off the bat, when we talk about entrepreneurship, I mean, I think the United States in general are probably the number one country on earth that comes to mind for young innovators and entrepreneurs when I think about where they can turn their ideas into reality. And I think, I mean, within that, MIT and Harvard are probably also two of the most ambitious and high places of highest quality to bring forward successful entrepreneurs. For example, with Mark Zuckerberg coming from Harvard and then bringing forward Facebook and then Meta, what it is today. And so with you having studied in those two places, what do you think, next to like greater abundance of capital and willingness to fund young people, what do you think makes these universities and institutions in the US such undisputed champions when it comes to bringing forward global entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So I think you mentioned, one name out of thousands of alumni from Harvard. I think what you're pointing to is that it's not just, that one example that sort of is giving the symbolic, the idea that U.S. is a great place for sort of entrepreneurial activity, but actually a series of many different profiles who have the opportunity, even if you're not a Mark Zuckerberg, and there are plenty of names from various different industries, of course. So I think I think to answer this question about like what does U.S. provide or U.S. universities provide, perhaps that allows that means that where we actually see so many entrepreneurial talent. Is that an okay way to interpret that?
I think that's the right way to interpret it.
Okay. I think it's one thing is the university environment itself, and another might be the culture of the United States itself. So if I start with the university culture, and I can only really share from my own experience, but it was very flexible. So I actually went to high school in the UK, and when I was applying for universities, I applied both to the UK and to the US. And I didn't realize how different those two experiences could be. But already from the application process for a United Kingdom application, I had to already specify the subject, and it was pretty defined what I was going to study once I get there. Whereas in the US, it was not at all about the subject or the major. It was more about you, the individual, and they wanted to see different characteristics, I guess, in your application. So from the very beginning, in terms of how they recruit and how they, what principles they perhaps look at, it's a much more open-ended application and not already predefined for you. That's, I think, one thing. And that flexibility means that during your time as an undergrad, that sort of flexibility continues until you must decide on something. And so you can actually explore many different avenues without sort of the risk of feeling like you're not on the right path or whatever, but it's really just sort of seen as a true explorative opportunity and time. I also think that there's a lot of openness, and what I mean by this is that naturally, universities or institutions, there's a lot of collaboration in Europe as well, and probably in Asia too. But where I was in Boston and in Cambridge in the U.S., there were many different collaborations between Harvard and MIT or various other institutions that I could list. So this concept of taking a course not from my university but from somewhere else, that was not foreign, and you could do that if you wanted to take a course at Tufts or wanted to take a course somewhere else. Those doors were actually quite open and not too complicated. So I think it's those two characteristics that make at least the universities in the U.S. An explorative space, which then as entrepreneurial competence or characteristic you are sort of exposed to. The other thing, I guess maybe the third thing is just access or proximity to the real world in some ways. There is, of course, events like the MIT Entrepreneurship Competition, where different industry players are actively engaged in that ecosystem, but also many examples of industry being much more curious and part of the experience. So, for example, with Harvard and their case method, that sort of database of rich information based on real cases doesn't happen unless you're very close to industry. So I think that actually is a huge advantage, and the fact that students get exposed to that type of knowledge and content. The country, I said there's two. The country itself is also perhaps just a very different kind of culture, right? It's very big. At the same time, I think the education system perhaps, although it depends on the European context, but just to sort of put together a very obvious contrast. There's a rank ordered system, there's a standardized test. Things are a little bit more competition oriented than it is perhaps in Denmark, for example, from the very early ages. So I think that does tend to sort of give people a bit more of a sense of what it means to be competitive, I think, or what that entails. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily in itself a good thing, but I think some level of that perhaps it encourages quality to be sorted.
Definitely, and I also really like the second last point you made about the cases at Harvard, because we actually do have a subject this year which is solely based on Harvard cases. Yeah. And you can really see like the sparks in our lecture room, because everyone is thinking about, okay, how could you, which angle could you take at this case, and so on and so forth, and it's not just theory heavy learning, which makes it super super interesting for the students.
And also on the other note, I think the way how they convey that information is like you're reading the script to like a movie. It's always super interesting to go through them, for sure.
No, definitely. Now given your background, you just described what you call the full circle of your career, with studying at universities and then ending up at CSE, which is an entrepreneurship center here in Copenhagen. What did lead that leap to go into CSE, and was there a specific problem that you felt universities were not solving properly yet?
I would never dare to think that somehow I can solve problems of universities. In fact, I think it was more the other way around, that I sort of saw this as an opportunity for me to further grow. I've actually never been the type to stay in like one thing too long. I think typically I've stayed on something for about 6 or 7 years. And each time I've always done something a little bit different in nature. So I started off after my MBA, I worked at a company called EF, Education First, worked in sort of helping set up the learning lab there, where we actually came up with new digital products and figured out how can we actually make this into a viable business, for example, in the early days of like iPhone and social media, etc. That doesn't necessarily translate directly to then a job at McKinsey, which was also completely different in nature, but in my mind made sense because it was sort of all this sort of product and business building work that I did in one setting. I wanted to sort of stretch that and test how that might look differently, or what I could actually develop further if I did that in a more multi-sector environment. And I was actually involved in the business building practice, both sort of helping grow that as a practice within the London office, but also try to make that into something more of an alternative service that McKinsey provided other than the traditional strategy. So that itself, in my mind, was also somewhat entrepreneurial, or sort of something about building something new. But I've always sort of wanted to do something in education from a very early age. So that passion led me to sort of take on the opportunity with the Lego Foundation, where the mission of the foundation was very much about children's learning and development. It was also where I learned a lot about Danish corporate setup and culture. And so when I learned about this opportunity at CSC, which was about innovation, it was about education, and it was about building businesses, and perhaps doing that in a university setting that wasn't so simple, but actually a complex setting, it somehow attracted me to it. And it felt like a combination of everything that I'd done previously that I could perhaps both apply and also learn more about.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I'm curious about is when we talk about your time before your MBA, as you mentioned earlier, you spent 2 years as an investment banking analyst. I think you were at Citibank in
That's right.
in New York. And I mean, a lot of people always say or see that being an investment banking analyst and starting your career in IB is a great launch pad for your future career in finance, and that it maybe is even regarded the best launch pad to start your career in finance out there. And I wanted to ask, do you see this the same way? And then based off your experience that you had in the, let me call it, school of IB, how did that shape your future work experiences, and how did that influence you moving forward?
Yeah. So, when I took on that job, I didn't think, I must do like investment banking. In fact, actually what I did do was some sort of slight hybrid of investment banking, where I did what's called public finance. And so already, perhaps I was already a little bit oriented towards public stuff already after my undergraduate, but then it translated to a public policy degree later. But this was investment banking, and we were doing, U.S. Healthcare sector work from a mergers and acquisitions perspective. But the vast majority of the public finance sector was actually about issuing municipal bonds, as in government-issued bonds that were tax exempt to actually support very large investment projects. And so the work was actually all about structuring bond deals, and also doing that in the public in the healthcare sector in the U.S. And I didn't know this when I joined, but like the fact that the healthcare sector was both sort of this public, semi-public sector, although it, or arguably. We're talking about hospital systems, actually.
Yeah.
At the same time, because hospital systems do merge and whatever, you could actually also get a taste of what mergers and acquisitions was like. So I sort of got taste of both worlds, both like financial restructuring as well as the active work of deal making and mergers and acquisitions. So how does that shape my experience now? Well, I still probably use some of those Excel tools. I don't know if those are super relevant nowadays, given so many other ways that you can probably do modeling and all of that. But just the way that you structure problems, the way that you engage with a client relationship, or even the exposure to sort of senior level meetings, and the pace at which things work, I think actually definitely was a good training ground for me. At the same time, as mentioned before, the actual work itself had an expiration date for me in terms of like how that matched my interests.
No, fair enough. And then maybe to move back into the present, maybe you could tell our listeners that are not familiar with what exactly is this Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship that we are in right now. So what does the CSE do on a day-to-day basis, and maybe also who it is for?
Yeah. So CSE, the Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship, is the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center within the Copenhagen Business School. We have existed since 2007, so I'm continuing the good work of the original starters of this work. We've been in existence for almost 20 years, so there's been an evolution of who we serve and what this is, what we do. At the core of our work is basically three things. One is we try to expose entrepreneurship and innovation capabilities to our students, both at CBS and generally people that are taking any sort of higher degree in Denmark. So if you are curious about entrepreneurship, if you have a business idea, you can come here and apply for either a workstation or apply for a program and experience both peer groups that might be in the same stage as you in terms of exploring or thinking about what entrepreneurship actually is, and learn by doing, either building a real business or solving some sort of real world problem. Oftentimes it's sort of an extracurricular endeavor. We also have credit giving opportunities for students at CBS as well through the programming that we do. Secondly, we are expanding our work, and we would like to be much more visible and offering many more opportunities and relevance for not necessarily just the early stage students or researchers who are curious about entrepreneurship, but those who are already actively building businesses. So what we call the scale-up community. We already have a program, for example, called Founder to Leader, where we take founders who are on a much larger and more serious, perhaps, leadership journey because their businesses are growing in a real way, to take them through a sort of a leadership course that then allows reflection and allows thinking about business building from a leadership perspective. At the same time, I think our work with the scale-up world is going to be increasingly more important because we know that for innovation and for entrepreneurship to actually matter in the long run, especially when value is aggregated for the benefit of European competitiveness, for example, that growing a business or scaling a business beyond the idea stage is actually where it's even harder to succeed. So we want to be, as an innovation and entrepreneurship center, be both much closer to where the action is and also be relevant in terms of research and programming. The third piece is that we are sitting in, and we have a beautiful location as part of the CBS campus in Porcelinshavn, and our goal is how do we make the research about business building or innovation or all the different aspects of operations, supply chain, finance. How do we use the latest technology? What's the appliance of the latest technology? How does different sectors and the competition or ways to market, how does that differ across different sectors? There's plenty of researchers that study this topic. There's plenty of researchers who study the history of entrepreneurship, and so it's a really great foundation for knowledge and research, and we want to make the knowledge that comes out of CBS much more accessible, much more, and also sort of create that collaboration between university and industry closer as well. So we have a triple mission, if you will.
No, I mean it's nice to hear what you just said. I think as Steve Jobs once famously said, I mean there's like 100 people that have great ideas, but then there's maybe one that's going to act on their idea. And I mean, based off what we hear from classmates and students, other students, and then friends of ours, people really appreciate this back-end support system that CSE provides, because at CBS there are certainly a lot of people that are very curious about entrepreneurship and testing out how it feels to work on the ideas and getting together with other people that have a similar mindset. And I mean, now you've been here for, I think, roughly 6 months, and you mentioned that the very first months here were a lot about listening for you. So Julius and I were curious, what kind of surprised you the most, or was something that you did not really expect when having these conversations with students, faculty members, and other people that are part of the CSE environment?
Yeah, I mean, so many impressions, but what I was perhaps most surprised by is how serious people were about innovation and entrepreneurship. And it did sort of get me back to my university days. Reminded me that, yeah, actually when I was in their shoes, in the student entrepreneur's shoes, for example, I thought this was the most serious thing ever. And to just be reminded of that intensity that exists at the Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship was a really fresh reminder, and not exactly, I guess, a surprise, but a nice reminder. I also think there are really diverse researchers here at CBS who study many different aspects of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I guess it's both an opportunity and a bit of a challenge at the same time, that there are many different perspectives and angles of research related to it. But at the same time, I think there is an opportunity to sort of then pool those and allow for a real platform for these ideas to be even more shared. And so I think there is actually quite an exciting opportunity that CSE can play in terms of a role for being a platform for many different researchers who are studying basically different parts of innovation and entrepreneurship to be collaborating even more. So yeah, I look forward to acting on that.
I definitely agree that, I mean, talent density, that's at least what we see from us, like from university, from friends, from different things. We participated at a hackathon last year, and we saw that talent density in Copenhagen, but I would say in the whole Nordic ecosystem, is incredibly high. I mean, education is, I would say, that's the best European educational system is in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. Mm-hmm. And it's probably a very cool environment for you to work in. And CBS has produced some unicorns as well, with now FlatPay being the most recent one. And you just talked about that you want to work on your visibility at CSE. Mm-hmm. What would you say is missing right now? Is it positioning yourself, or further structural integration within CBS, for example?
Yeah, I think it's actually a bit of both. Mm-hmm. To your point, the talent density is great, and also because of the cultural norms here, as well as the educational system, which actually truly encourages agency. So, even from a very young age, unless that you're interested in something, no one is forcing you to do anything from a very early childhood. So I think part of actually, in contrast to sort of a competitiveness-driven quality, the agency-driven quality is also, I think, incredibly unique, and that's partly what makes this talent density and the interested parties being quite serious about what they're engaging in, what it is here in the Nordics. When it comes to visibility, what I mean is that we still basically reach, depending on how you count, anywhere from 0.5% to a little north of 5% of the campus population with all of our programming and activities. So there is a huge group of people who perhaps go through their time here at CSC as a student or otherwise and don't ever really set foot here. So I think that's a massive opportunity that we should engage with, and a large audience that we should engage with, especially because I think entrepreneurship is not just about business building, it's about building those mindsets and that resilience and the muscle for active problem solving with diverse perspectives. So I think that's going to be necessary no matter what kind of career endeavor you have. When it comes to the outside world, outside of the CBS boundaries, I think in order for this not to be just, another interesting learning experience that I had, which in itself is fantastic, but if we are actually serious about universities playing a much larger role in European competitiveness and innovation actually turning to something of social value faster, and perhaps at greater scale, then there's absolutely a role for business schools to play. And we have a responsibility almost to ensure that those that are in this environment get to experience what it might be in a very safe environment, and also that we can create those bridges and connections for what needs to happen after, even though we are a bridge, but I think it's an important bridge and role that we play.
So right on the topic of engaging with the right audience, let's maybe walk through a little imaginary scenario, because I think Julius often comes to me and has a lot of great business ideas where he's like, what do you think about this? Do you think this makes sense? And so let's say that we actually double down and walk the walk on one of Julius's ideas and actually have the objective to found a business and then bring an idea into reality. So then, what are we considering when choosing between, should we go to CSE and join them, or should we maybe go to the inner city and maybe knock on the doors of an accelerator such as Antler? So how do we decide between CSE and maybe one of these other programs or a VC fund, and also within that, maybe what is CSE deliberately trying not to be and trying to do different than these other opportunities?
Yeah, so good question. It's actually something that I am constantly asking myself. What is the unique role that we should play as a university player? I think there's maybe it's easier to start with what we don't want to be. We do not want to be another VC fund. We don't want to be optimizing for returns per se. We have our mission, which is the same mission as the rest of the university, which is that we want to transform transform society through business, and ultimately the best way to do that is by the graduates that come out of this institution. And CSC is an extended arm of that, where it's another playground and it's another sandbox where you can experiment and take more risks. I also think that it is very much an ecosystem. Innovation and entrepreneurship doesn't just happen because you only have the Antlers of the world, and it doesn't happen just because you have a lot of entrepreneurs. You need funders. You need environments where failures can happen without much cost. You need learning environments where different things are experimented on, different combination of things are tried, and also especially when it comes to innovation that has a technical angle, which is pretty much every innovation. Most of the innovation that's happening at the moment, whether that's idea-based technologies or deep tech, for example, you have to actually already from a very early age or early stage be exposed to many of those different multidisciplinary areas. So I think we have a role to play to provide those diverse environments. I also think that as a university we have a mission to educate and research at the same time, and so that is our unique foundation that we stand on, is that we do things that are research based, and we should then be able to turn that into societal value. And the education piece, a lot of that should happen through active learning, but also peer-to-peer learning, and perhaps also different ways in which you can reflect the sort of the human side of building a business beyond what you might be pressured with when you're actually actively looking for investor returns.
I mean, I really like that because you just said VC funds. I mean, they are very far left on the J-curve. They have to optimize for financial returns, and you look for much more diverse set of founders. So I could imagine that this approach does also shape the type of founders you support and attract. Because we actually had the pleasure. I mean, it wasn't by a chance that Konsti said Antler. We had the pleasure of talking to the GP here in Copenhagen, and we asked him the question: okay, what do you actually look for when you ask yourself if you should invest into a founder or not? And then he said, okay, there's some traits that you look at if you want a math Olympiad or something similar. And I thought, okay, this is actually very one-dimensional if you only look at the people that are good at STEM. I mean, there's so many more people that have good ideas, that are good at something, and it's so easy to build a product right now without being super technical. So how does that structural difference of you being also covering that educational angle affect the type of founders you support and also the risks that you are willing to take?
Yeah, so as an educational institution, first and foremost, I don't think there is sort of like a filter through which we don't support this type of founder or that type of founder, or we are only like looking at this particular type of industries. In fact, we want to be as led by the students and their interests, and so that's not really where we want to put restrictions. But what we do want to sort of influence is, I think, very much rooted in also the CBS values of typically, the Nordic values. But then for CBS, we also have our own Nordic 9 framework. So our entrepreneurial and innovation guiding principles actually also stem from that same origin. And so the sense of responsibility, the sense of responsibility for yourself and for others and the planet, all of that, I think, is certainly a uniquely Nordic trait that is worth growing and sharing with more of the world, as well as, therefore, many different types of business models that perhaps are created uniquely here in this setup, perhaps compared to many other places that can be born because of those sorts of values, and not just sort of dismissed because of lack of short-term returns, for example. So yeah, I think that's sort of what I would say to that.
And maybe in proximity to that, if you then have founders at CSE that maybe now have to make the next move because they are funding ready, how do you prepare them best to jump into that? I would say it's a Shark Tank right now with everything that's going on. across Copenhagen, but primarily
On a
also
global scale
Stockholm.
as well.
Yeah, and on the global
I
scale.
think it's like a pace that we're in is unprecedented right now.
Exactly. So how do you make sure that they are actually, like, when they knock at Antler's door and say, okay, we're actually ready to get some funding, how do you make that show? Now I repeated myself 4 times.
No, that's okay. So I think the question is, what do we do here to prepare
Exactly.
more sort of specifically? So first of all, it's there are many different programs that we offer at different stages of potentially somebody's innovation and entrepreneurial journey. And we believe that the best learning happens when you're actually actively engaging in something real, and therefore learning by doing. So the programs are designed, for example, to sort of work on a real company's problem, or designed to look at not just like an entrepreneurial idea, but potentially a larger set of problems that might exist in the world, and sort of identify both the problem space and also the idea space in the very early stages. And we also try to make it as easy for you as possible to explore what you think is actually of interest, what is of interest to you, and how does that actually sort of play out in terms of a real world need. At the very early stages, there's many different programs for that, including, for example, the Open Innovation Program or Explore. As you sort of become a bit more acquainted and not too scared of what it means to be entrepreneurial or innovative, we also provide space for you to come and work on an idea and turn that into a business. We also have many different domain experts that come and provide lectures and or interaction points. We also have relationships with our in-kind sponsors who provide real practical advice at different stages, no matter what stage you are at of your idea or non-idea, on accounting, legal, and various other sort of foundational elements of building a business. We also have very specific training modules to build up your competence on whether that's events planning or team building, or just knowing how to conduct yourself in serious meetings, or what does it mean to then think about employment, or getting people. So all the different aspects of perhaps building a business, there's very targeted modules for that. And lastly, perhaps what I will say is that we're also, of course, I think it's important that we're actually working even more closely with our ecosystem, both the funders who potentially will be the ones that are funding, as well as those who may actually not necessarily become an entrepreneur themselves after some of this experience, but maybe become investors themselves as part of to what you just said. So I think it's both sides that we should also be doing more of. We don't do too much on that side, but I think that could be an interesting future area to grow.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and maybe also pertaining to this, what's going on like in the founding landscape right now. I mean, like there's a massive surge in AI-driven ideas and startups, especially also in robotics and then deep tech. And actually, just in late December last year, we spoke to a founder in Munich in Germany, who, going back to financial modeling, actually has a startup that automates company analyses and then financial valuations for M&A transactions. And he very thoroughly emphasized also how important it is to have a technical co-founder when going about these things, especially when working with new technologies. So I was curious, do you think that maybe we as business schools run the risk of becoming second to maybe engineering faculties? And then also, how should we set ourselves up as a business school for continued success and relevancy in the startup field?
Yeah, I think it couldn't be further from the truth that business schools are somehow.
Well, I'd like to hear that.
Because you refer to Steve Jobs, but I think it's almost a truth. It is a truth that we are humans, and therefore there is, of course, the engineering and mathematical side of things. But in order to actually build or scale any kind of business or impact, you absolutely need the social sciences. And the business school is the place where social sciences is researched, where it's advanced, where we're on the frontiers of that. So, and particularly, especially because, to your point, building a product, designing a service, creating a model, and the analytics behind that is becoming much less costly and faster to do than what is sort of the business, the core of any business, and management of people, and the different configurations that'll start to shape because of the forces of technology and all of that becomes actually a much harder challenge, and a very new challenge that then needs to be seen with a critical social science eye. So that is one point. The second point is, again, when we talk about European competitiveness, innovation actually being commercialized, or true impact being had for a sustained period from any new innovation, all of these are scaling problems, and scaling problems are complex. And these are complex business problems that range from everything from personal leadership all the way to supply management and pricing and all of that, business models and everything in between. So it will always be relevant, in my opinion.
That's a good point. And I think also, for me, to be honest, I'm often eyeing at different universities when I'm thinking, maybe there they have this super interesting course in economics, or look at these schools, they have super well-known finance professors. But I think one thing where you can actually be very proud of CBS is when it comes to how well they do in social sciences, and also what research is being done here in social sciences, which is very nice. So
yeah, I fully agree. You just shortly referred to Europe's competitiveness, which is a persistent theme in basically all of our podcast episodes. It doesn't matter if we talk to the German Vice Chancellor, we talk to different VCs, we talk to founders, and in every episode we talk about
at least one question
about the about the innovation gap or the execution gap between Europe and the US. So now, as you being someone that lived in the US and in Europe, had got education there, and now works in education in Europe, I would be interested in knowing, do you now collaborate with policymakers at CSE to help closing that gap? And if so, what is expected from you as an educational institution?
Well, so as a public university, we are very much tied to the policies being set and being made by the politicians here. At the same time, of course, luckily we have democratic institutions that have the ability to listen to institutions and people to sort of make some decisions about what the right policies are. So it's not just, based on sort of one perspective. So there is definitely policy that influences what we do as a university or as an innovation center, and also opportunities for us to perhaps share what we believe are important to make happen, at the CBS leadership level, and that's probably where there's most time spent, is with those policymakers. when it comes to sorry, what was the end of the second part of the question?
What is expected of you as an educational institution to close that
what's
gap?
Expected of us,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's actually quite a lot expected of us at this point, or at least there is innovation. There's innovation as an agenda in the political arena for Denmark. I think is very very considered very urgent. I also think that there's a role for universities to play, and therefore they are encouraging us to and investing, frankly, in our institutions to really try to engage in not the same things we've done before, but to really accelerate and change the way that we're both initiating or catalyzing innovation, but then turning that into impact. So there's absolutely a lot of activity right now from that angle, and we're certainly recipients of that attention. And we hope that with our 3-pillar mission, that we can actually make some positive influence there.
I mean, let's hope so. But I think, I think that like throughout, I mean, it's been like, as Julia said, like in every episode we kind of pick up on this this topic, and I think, I mean, like now we've been doing these podcast recordings for over a year, and I think throughout that course, I think from the get-go when we started asking about European competitiveness until now, I think our view has probably gotten more optimistic as well throughout that time span. And I mean, thank you so much for all the topics that we've covered today. And our last section of the episode is always kind of angled towards bringing in something insightful and motivational for our listeners that they can pick up on. And as you mentioned, it's important for you to make entrepreneurship accessible to everyone beyond the people that are just already entrepreneurial. And how, in your ideal world, can we lower the barriers of entry for entrepreneurship through the Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship, for example, without lowering the standards of ideas and people and what they can produce?
Deep question. How can we lower the barriers to entrepreneurship without lowering the standards? Yeah. First of all, I think it's making it known that we are open for everyone, not just a particular stereotype. And therefore, it also means that we need to not only have our open doors, but also be a platform where diverse faces and diverse paths are actually told. And so that there's a virtuous cycle of newcomers and those that have had great experiences as a result. So I guess that's the fundamental and foundational thing of doing it, but also talk about it. I also think that there is, as we discussed just in the earlier question, a lot of sense of urgency for innovation, and I think it's also about how do we deploy that investment responsibly, and recognizing that different audiences have different thresholds or entry points to entrepreneurship. So for example, we find that there's actually a lot more female participants with CSE through our academic course. And so they get exposed to CSE programming because they signed up to an academic internship where the door towards entrepreneurship is through an academic credit, whereas those that just come in through the door with an idea tends to be more male dominated by the male population. So I think it's also our job to sort of identify different avenues in which we can engage with diverse audiences and ensure that those also exist.
I really like that angle. Maybe lastly, to round up the very interesting conversation we had today, if now Konsti and I would say, okay, we take one of my seemingly interesting ideas seriously, what would you advise us to start our own venture, and how can people that listened until now get involved with CSE?
Yeah, you're gonna have to tell me what the idea is, but don't be afraid. Make sure that you are testing your ideas with not just with customers, but with different experts, and really seeing, getting diverse angles of any situation, and don't necessarily take the first unexpected response as any kind of sign of failure. It's actually a sign of progress. In terms of CSE, please do look us up.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly.
And we are really keen to get as many different profiles interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, and so look forward to welcoming new audiences and also getting engaged with the ecosystem even more.
Great.
Awesome, thank you. I think that's the perfect moment to finish off our conversation. So, Yerrie, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule and also hosting us in your office. And thank you for the great conversation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I had a great time and a lot of fun as well.
Thank you.